Hi, I'm Terry Dunne. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is February 19th, 1990. And when I showed up in AA in 1990, 34 minutes sounded possible. 34 days sounded like a reach, and 34 years just sounded completely, utterly impossible. My story lays out like ours are supposed to, what it was like, what happened, and what we're like now. I do have to spend some time on my childhood background because it sets up everything in my story. So I was the fifth born out of 8 kids. My mother was pregnant 11 years in a row. So my oldest brother is 6 years older than me. My youngest brother is 4 years younger than me. I'm right in the middle. So growing up, it was a lot of fun, never bored. My dad was from Queens, went to Regis High School in New York City on a scholarship, went to Fordham University on a scholarship, and went to Columbia University for dental school, and then served as a dentist in the military for part of the Korean War. And one of my brothers was actually born, my brother Kevin was born in Panama. So my father loved language, especially he knew some phrases in German and Polish from his neighborhood growing up in Queens, and he loved to speak Spanish. Anyway, when I was a kid, he was like super fun, really smart, showed me how to tie my shoes, how to ride a bike, how to catch a ball, how to shoot a basketball, how to dribble a basketball. He was right about everything, and I really looked up to him. At least that's how I perceived him, that he was right about everything. And things suddenly changed when I was 8 years old. One night he lost his cool at the dinner table, and we had seen him get mad at us for making too much noise or breaking something, but we'd never seen him this angry. So all the kids, all 10 of us ate dinner together every night, and the kids kind of scattered from the table, leaving my father at one end of a long table and my mother at the other end. And we all kind of hid, waiting to hear what was going to happen next. And it wasn't long before you heard plates being thrown and him shouting, and then him hitting my mother and her saying, "Jack, please stop, Jack, please stop," and he kept hitting her. So about a week later, my mother called a family meeting for 9 of us, everybody except my dad, and she laid out an evacuation plan where she would get the baby, my oldest brother John would get the second youngest, my older sister would get my younger sister, and Kevin, my older brother, would get my older brother Brian, because I sat at my father's right hand. So my mother's plan was to get everybody else safe and then come back and peel my father off of me if this was to ever happen again. And at the time we had no idea when or if it would happen, but it happened with regularity for the next 5 years, from the time I was 8 till about 13. It happened every month, sometimes only once or twice a month, but sometimes 6 or 7 times a month, and the not knowing was just terrifying. I'd be nervous, I would shake my water glass, picking it up, and sometimes I knocked it over, which prompted the outbursts and the beatings. And then there were times I just did stupid stuff as a kid that prompted a beating from my dad. Nobody else seemed to be getting these. And the beatings weren't the worst part, and they were pretty terrible. He threw me down the stairs from over his head. He was 6'4". I was 8. And at the bottom of the stairs were cast iron radiators, and he had me squat on all fours in front of the radiator. He'd kick me in the rear end as hard as he could, so I'd go slamming into the radiator, and I was getting bruised and battered at both ends. He whipped me with the belt, took off his Oxford shoes and hit me with the heel across the back of the head multiple times. This was standard operating procedure for the beatings. And if I was quick enough, I could get away, but he would chase me through the house with the belt lashing me, and it was no fun. But what he said while doing this was the thing that shaped me, not so much the beatings. "You've been a burden to me and your mother since the day you were born. You're a worthless piece of crap. You'll never amount to anything. I can't believe you're my son." And it was all said with a lot more force than that. But that was the general message every single time. And the more he had to say, the more blows I had to take. The only time he hit me in the face was when I did something stupid. I was playing with my brother Brian in the yard. We had found a soccer ball in our yard. Somebody kicked it over the fence and never came to get it. It was there for like 2 or 3 weeks. And he found some darts that my dad had that were like, metal tipped, the kind you'd throw in a bar at a dartboard. So we're throwing it at the soccer ball, and the ball would move every time you hit it. So it was kind of challenging. We were like 12 and 13. My brother Owen was like 8. And I threw the dart as Owen decided he wanted to kick the ball, and he hit the ball, and then the dart went right into his leg, and he went down. Fucking hey, holy shit, this really hurts, Jesus Christ, oh my God. You know, he's swearing, he's 8. And so my mother runs out, she's a trained nurse, and she started taking care of him. We all go in the house to see, you know, what she has to do, and my dad grabs me by the collar and drags me back out to the yard and starts beating me. I can't believe you taught Owen that language. And he's hitting me and hitting me. And when he got tired of hitting me, I was saying the whole time, Dad, I didn't teach him this language. Dad, I didn't teach him those words. I swear to God, I swear to God. And when he got tired, he asked me, oh, well, then who taught him? You know, if I was using my head, I could have told a white lie and said, I have no idea, Dad. But I was a truth teller to the man who knows everything, who's always right. So I said to him, Dad, frankly, you're the only person in our household that swears. So he probably learned them from you. And then I got slapped across the face with the forehand, the backhand, got my head banged against the garage. And those are the only times he gave me facial injuries because he didn't want to be found out that he was this way with me at home. To the outside world, he was a wonderful man. He was handsome, he was funny. He served on the Knights of Columbus, the Board of Health, the Board of Recreation, and other organizations. He joined a country club that allowed Irish Catholics, Jewish people, Polish and Italian families to join, where the traditional clubs didn't. And so to the outside world, he was a huge success and a wonderful man. Even my friends who met him said, God, your dad's a lot of fun. He's very funny, he's a great joke teller, blah, 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 you know, later on in life. But that wasn't the impression I got. I mean, that wasn't the impression we lived with at home, but it was the impression he gave the outside world. So he had one persona for the outside world and one for us, and a worse one just for me. So in this window of time, I started having this recurring dream that we would take a trip to Michigan most every year in that window, and even before, to visit my father's favorite cousins. One family had 9 kids, one family had 6 kids, and we had 8 kids, and we all tried to squeeze into this 2-bedroom cottage. And we'd sit at long picnic tables and have meals, and they were a lot of fun. There were a lot of laughs. They taught me how to fish, how to hike, and look for catch snakes and frogs and toads. And we played horseshoes and softball, and we water skied. It was just a lot of fun. And then, so I had this dream that on one of these trips, I'm outside of the car, walking along a cornfield, not knowing where I was, and I walked and walked and walked and never saw a living human. And I would wake up sweating from this dream. And I had this dream from the time I was a child until I was about 50. So, and I never could quite put it together. I will go back to that later because it's important. So I emerged from this 5-year window of beatings and being torn down as a person with a strong resentment against authority figures, especially stern authority figures. No sense of actual boundaries for myself, when to stand up for myself and when not to. And I came away with the idea that strategic lying could serve me really well through the balance of my life, because had I done that when I threw the dart in my brother's leg, I wouldn't have got my head smashed into the garage. So that was what set me up. I had these really strong beliefs, and I felt like a worthless piece of garbage because I've been hearing it consistently for 5 years. And I decided to do what my father did, was present an outside persona to the world. So I was Johnny Hustle in gym class, Johnny Hustle in every sports team I was on. I tried hard in school to get good grades because, if he's a B student, he can't be a bad kid. If he tries that hard, he must be a good kid. And that was kind of and I was a class clown, and my whole family's generally funny. But so, like for example, in 8th grade, we would go to the library from our classroom, and somebody would be given a list of the students, and they were last name, first name, and then the librarian would check you off by reading it the right way. So it'd be like Dunne, Terry's Terry Dunne here, okay? And so I wrote in the name, last name Jas and first name Hugh, and stuck it at the bottom of the list. And she gets down there, Hugh Jas? Has anybody seen a Hugh Jas? And we all start giggling. And I, of course, got sent to the principal's office, but it was worth it, to have the whole class like chuckle and stuff. But I made a best friend who had the same sense of humor as me. We were lifelong friends until he passed away a few years ago, and he was sober when he died. So at 13 was the last trip that we took as a family to Michigan, and the older siblings had stopped coming because they had gotten summer jobs and needed the money to help offset their college expenses. So my brother Brian, I believe, was the oldest one in the car. So he was my Irish twin. We're just under 9 months apart in age. He was born 1959 in September, mid-September. I was born the beginning of July in 1960. And so for every summer, we were the same numerical age. So when he was 5, I was 5, but then he turned 6 at the end of the summer. And that went on. But we decided we were going to get drunk because the parents would always go out and go see like a stand-up comic and have dinner, and they'd be gone for hours. So we all chipped in and paid a neighbor to buy us a bottle of booze. We weren't specific about what to get. We gave him $25. He brought us back a bottle of tequila. And, you know, as little kids, we didn't know how to drink tequila. I don't think I'd ever seen it drinking in a movie at that point. So we mixed up a big thing of strawberry Kool-Aid and chased the tequila with the Kool-Aid, and we consumed the whole thing in like 20 minutes. And we're all starting to feel the effects, and we decided to play manhunt in the dark at this lake house. And my cousin Bobby went out to hide on the water in a canoe and dropped the paddle and had to spend the night on the water. I was chasing somebody, and I didn't know our neighbor had a boat trailer next to their cottage. And when I went around the cottage, it hit me on both shins, and it must have knocked me out when I landed, because I woke up with somebody standing on my hand going, "Terrence, are you over here? Terrence, can you hear me?" I'm like, "I can hear you. You're on my hand. Could you move your feet so I can get up?" And so we had a lot of fun. But at like 2 o'clock in the morning, I woke up knowing I had to vomit. Now the house was full of people. I didn't want to vomit in the little bathroom we had. I'd wake everybody up, and it would kind of blow the whistle on what we had been doing. So I went out to a field behind the cottage, got down on all fours, and threw up for about an hour, and had dry heaves for at least another hour. And I'm thinking to myself the whole time, God, that was a blast. It was so much fun. But I must have done something wrong. I'll do better next time. I'll do better next time. That was like a recurring thought that stayed with me through all of my drinking. I'll do better next time. And you know what? I never did better. I threw up a lot. There's this bar of standards I had when I was a kid. You know, be honest and ethical and this and that. And then as the more I drank and started to use drugs, the bar went down here. I was never going to do drugs while down here because I'm doing pot and smoke, and occasionally I'm offered like cocaine or speed in college. And then, you know, starting to purposely break the law and then risk getting arrested and stuff like that all the time. And so the bar just lowered. It was like the AA limbo. It just had to go down a little lower to get under the bar. But at 13, we had that planned drunk. That was the first time I set out to got drunk. And then in high school, my father grounded me all the time. So I got very few opportunities to actually get drunk in high school. But the few times I did, I overdid it and threw up. And then I was never really offered drugs in high school because I wasn't at the parties, most of them, and it just never came my way. But when I left for college, I went to Muhlenberg College in Allentown, Pennsylvania. My oldest brother had gone there, was captain of the football team, captain of the lacrosse team, and president of the ATO fraternity, which recruited me as a legacy. But I was recruited to play football and lacrosse just like my brother. And I was very good at lacrosse and pretty good at football in high school. And so I was a goalie in lacrosse and a lineman who was kind of skinny in football. But I had a surgery like a month before I left for football camp, preseason training, and I had to leave the wound open, and I lost like 25, 30 pounds and on a liquid diet. So I was too skinny to play, and the wound had not healed yet. So I became the manager of the football team. So one of the last nights of football camp, we all got drunk, and I was treated a little less than because I was the manager and not a player. But I was used to being treated less than by my own family, especially my father. And we had just seen Animal House right before I left for college. So we're riding on tops of cars, holding onto the windows, driving down the street, drunk as hell, yelling anybody we could see. We went into one of the dorms, had a fire extinguisher fight up on the third floor of one of the dorm buildings. and somebody got me good, and I backed up and kind of kicked and hit my butt against the window frame, and the glass didn't break. The whole window fell out of the third story of this dorm because it was an old building, and the window frame just tumbled to the sidewalk and shattered in front of a bunch of students. So there were witnesses, and I didn't think anything of it. 2 days later, I'm in front of the dean of students, and he goes, you know, if it's up to me, I'd expel you right now. But you've paid your tuition, you haven't been to a single class, and you're this close to being kicked out of college. So I'm keeping my eye on you, buddy. You screw up just once, even a little, I'm sending you home expelled. So this is before that of class. Alcohol is causing me to possibly get bounced out of college, you know? And I was recruited to join this fraternity. I got introduced to pot and other things there. And I like getting high and drunk, but the combination, if I did it in the wrong order, would always cause me to vomit. And so I became friends with guys that like to party. I wanted to party, and we overdid it a lot. And then I was made social chairman of my fraternity because I had an Olds 1972, Olds 98 from 1972. Had fins in the front and fins in the back, and bench seats in the front and the back, and it was almost 6 feet across. I could lay down in the back seat. So I could get 6 kegs of beer into that car and drive them to the fraternity house. And I looked older than my age, so I never got carded. And if I had to, I could drive to Jersey. It was only 20 minutes to go to Jersey to get the beer. But it was more of a pain to return the empty kegs. So they made me the social chairman. Our house was built to be an ATO house. And we had a secret meeting room with an old soda machine in front of it, and it had like 4 types of soda and a can of beer as an option. All of it was a quarter, and I became the social chairman. Like, what are we doing selling soda? So took all the soda out. It was 5 types of beer you could get for a quarter. We definitely were losing money on the machine, but the brothers liked it. But I found a way for us to make money on our party nights. And so we started making money hand over fist, where other fraternities were like struggling and would have to cancel parties because they didn't have the money. And we started having, I decided we needed to have beer on tap in the fraternity house every single night. And the guys who would go out and spend their pocket money on beer were really happy that they didn't have to spend their money to go get beer. So I became very popular in the fraternity, and I really loved it. And we were a terrible lacrosse team, but I was, one of the 4 best players on the team. There was 4 of us that were really competent and skilled players, and the rest of us were learning. But so I was an all-state goalie in high school in New Jersey, and we had a goalie that was not as good as me, but that was the only position he knew how to play. So they had me play. I was the alternate defenseman, I was an alternate midfielder, and I was an alternate attackman. So I was always on the field. I think our record was 10-2 the first year I was there. And, a little better than that my second year, but in my sophomore year I got a memo to go to a budget meeting for the college, and I'm like, why do I have to go to a budget meeting? So I had a few beers and got high and went to the budget meeting, and they announced that they're dropping men's lacrosse because of Title IX. They had money for 1 lacrosse team, and they were going to start a women's team and cancel the men's program altogether. And then they also announced that my major, which is communications, they had brought in this guy, Dr. Gordon from Hofstra, to launch our new communications program. He and I got along famously. I got straight A's, and he was going to go back to Hofstra and not complete building this layer cake program we had, so they were going to hold off on having it as an official major of the college until such time they could replace him. So there was no way I could graduate with my major. And then they were raising tuition 50%. And in a moment of clarity, I couldn't really justify. The only thing keeping me at the school was these guys that I like to drink and do drugs with. My girlfriend was going to another school, so it was like a permission slip to tie one on every chance I got because I didn't have to be there for her. And I didn't look for other romantic entanglements because I really loved this girl. And so when I transferred, I was looking for a school to transfer to, and they made my brother Brian, my Irish twin, they turned him from an attackman into a goalie because they heard his brother was a really good goalie. And he was pretty skilled at it, but he was like a hothead. And you'd hear him yelling at the game, "You guys suck!" He's not talking to the other team, he's talking to his team because they're not playing good defense. And that's not how you goaltend. You tell them, "Hey, you gotta slide left, slide left." all right, get him next time. You got to be all like gung-ho, cheering him on, positive attitude to get any cooperation from him. And he took the other tack. So I decided, let's do that, Brian. I'll go to school with you at Kane University in New Jersey. It was Kane College at the time. And so I became the goalie there, and he got to go play attack. And it's a real blessing that I got to do that. My sister Sheila was also going to the school, but Brian was taken from us way too young, and not having a crystal ball, I never would have known that. But we had really good quality time together. So I go to Kane. I get mono right away. I've been every class once, maybe one or two classes twice, and I have spent the next 3 weeks in bed. And I'm reading the textbooks that I bought to try to keep up with the syllabus, submitting any work I can through my brother. And then I, start making classes full time about week 4, near the end of September. And since I'm feeling better, he says to me, why don't you come with me to the campus pub? I can introduce you to the lacrosse team and some other guys that are cool on campus. And I said, sure, let's do that. So we get over there early, like 8 o'clock. And the pub's already humming, and he's had a couple beers before we got there. He runs to the bathroom and goes, hey, listen, I got to go to the bathroom, orders a pitcher of beer, and I'll meet you, find us a table. Right? So I get in line for beer at the bar. I'm like third in line. I didn't know it was pledge week, and neither did he. And one of the fraternities had one of their pledge tasks was to pick a fight with the tallest guy standing up in the bar. So some guy takes a glass pitcher and shatters it over my right shoulder. It knocks me off balance. I fall into the guy in front of me. He turns around, punches me in the gut, and then I turn around to the guy who smashed his pitcher on me. Hey, what the heck, man? I've never met you. What's your beef? And next thing I know, 2 bouncers usher me outside, and I'm seated at a bench outside the bar. I can't get back in. I don't know anybody, so I don't know who to say, hey, if you see my brother Brian in there, tell him I got kicked out. I'm stuck out here. So 3 hours later, Brian meanders out of the bar a little drunk. He goes, oh, I thought you got lucky. I had no idea you were out here. I'm like, no, I got unlucky, and I got bounced before you got done peeing in the bathroom. And he goes, well, maybe you should drive because I'm a little tipsy. So as I get him in the car, I roll down his window on this Cutlass that we had that was in the early 70s. And I seat him in the car, and I get around to the drive, and we're driving back. It's not far. It's like 11 miles. And he's like, oh, I feel terrible. I think I'm going to throw up. I said, well, if you're going to throw up, stick your head out the window or let me know. I'll pull over. So he starts cranking the window up, leans into the glass and vomits, and it shoots over his shoulders. And I'm driving the car, and I'm getting soaked with hot beer vomit. Ah! He doesn't seem to have a drop on him. We get home, and my mother's still up because, it's only like 11 o'clock. And she goes, Terrence, you are disgusting. I can't believe you were driving the car in that condition. I said, no, Mom. I got kicked out of the bar before I had a drop to drink. This is Brian's vomit. He threw up on me on the drive home. Oh, you and your stories, which underscores, even she, was starting to buy the BS that I was a worthless piece of crap and would never amount to anything. And she made me clean the car. I was up till 3 o'clock in the morning cleaning the car. Meanwhile, Brian had no consequences. They wouldn't let me drive the family car, and for like a month. It was just crazy. But so that was my introduction to Kane, and so we did a lot of drinking and drugging in my fraternity at Muhlenberg. We did drinking and drugging at Kane University, but Kane had to be a little more careful because we were going to end up in my parents' home. So we were a little more discreet about it, but we would go out on the weekends to clubs in New York City and see cool bands. So we saw Madness. And we saw Squeeze a couple times. There were a couple local bands we followed, like Urban Blight, that played like a really cool brand of reggae. And we would get liquored up before we went in because the beer was so expensive in the city. We'd take my car or somebody else's car and go in every weekend and see these great shows and get really drunk. And it was, that was how college went. But I kept this persona, play hard, work hard kind of guy. I ended up the captain of the lacrosse team my senior year. I was nationally ranked 3rd in the country 2 years in a row at Kane in Division III, and set a couple records at the school, like 42 saves in one game because we didn't have a good defense. But we beat our arch rival my senior year because I made the assist as a goalie. I ran all the way down and dumped it to an attackman who scored the winning goal, and it was a great memory. And funny, we played a team, Marist, which is out on Long Island, and their captain was this guy, Joe Dunne. And I was the captain of the Kane team. And after the game, my father says to me, you know, that's your distant cousin, because my dad's cousin, Joe, was constantly being arrested by his cousins who were NYPD because of drunken disorderly. So they bought him a house at the tip of Long Island, or as far as they could go, and they set him up with a mortgage-free lifestyle out there. And this was his grandson. And so my father came out and introduced the two of us and kind of asked Joe about his dad and his grandfather and stuff. But I just thought it was ironic that, you know, I'm playing against a Dunne cousin, and he was good. He was a good player. But so I had to go one extra semester to college because when I transferred from Muhlenberg to Kane, phys ed at Muhlenberg was pass-fail. Kane didn't accept pass-fail. So I had 5 extra courses to take, so I didn't graduate until like March of the following year after everybody left for college with it. And my girlfriend was graduating Penn State just a couple months later, and so we had gotten engaged to get married pretty quickly. I was offered a job with the Campbell Soup Company before I graduated, so I took the job, never bothered to go to the graduation because I wanted money and a way to get out of my parents' house as quickly as I could. So I married Barbara that summer, and my parents came up to me at the wedding and said, "You were such a lucky man. You know, you're getting Barbara, and she's getting stuck with you." And this is how they like wished me well on this thing. So I was on a 2-day bender. I hadn't slept at all really for 2 straight days when we got married, and she did smoke pot with me and occasionally did cocaine with me, but she definitely drank with me in the beginning, and then she backed away from all that. And it really wasn't long before I revealed to her and to everybody but me that I was like a terrible husband. I liked to golf on the weekends or play club lacrosse, so I'd be gone like for golf 4 or 5 hours, and there was always like drinking before I'd go home. And I wasn't emotionally available to talk to her. I was tired, sweaty, and stinky. And when I played club lacrosse, we played teams on Long Island, teams in upstate New York, teams in Virginia and Maryland and Pennsylvania out to Gettysburg. So those could be like 8-hour days to play like an hour and a half lacrosse game. It always involved drinking before and during the drive home. And so I was unavailable emotionally for most of the marriage on the weekends. But during the week, I was a good cook, and we would talk and be normal people to each other for the first part of our marriage. But as I was at a game on a Saturday, a club lacrosse game. It was only 2 or 3 towns away. We stopped though and had a few beers and smoked a joint or two in the parking lot. And then I went home, and as I walk in the door, my wife's handing me the phone. "Your mother's on the phone." I'm like, "Hello?" She goes, "Terrence, come over right now." I said, "Mom, I just got back from lacrosse. I need a shower." No, right now it's important. So I said, "Okay." So Barbara and I got in the car and go over to my parents' house, and Brian had gone into the Navy. Before he finished college, he said to me, "Do you see me wearing a suit going to the bank or selling life insurance or any of that crap in a suit?" I said, "No, not really. He goes, I want to fly planes for the Navy. I'm going to pursue this." And that officer and gentleman program is the same program he got into, but it was out of Pensacola, Florida. And he didn't have the vision to become a pilot, but he became a naval aviator and a flight officer. And we pull up to my parents' house, and Brian's 26 years old, and there's 2 naval officers with their hats in their hands, addressing my family, telling them that our brother had passed away in a peacetime accident. And so Brian and I shared a bedroom, a wardrobe, best friends, and dreams for the future. His kids were going to play with my kids. I was going to play, and my kids were going to play with his kids. We would be close for all of our lives. And all that was taken too, and never saw it coming. And emotionally, I wasn't very mature, and a lot of my siblings weren't either, especially the drinkers, and really had no idea how to handle it. My friends were much the same way. So they took me out as we waited for his body to return. The U.S. Navy took 4 days to do their investigation. The Italian government took another couple days to do theirs, and then they had to ship the body back stateside. So it was 8 days we waited for his body to return. So 8 days in a row my friends got me fraternity party drunk. And when I was in college, after the fraternity party, it was really like Tuesday or Wednesday before I felt normal. And that was just one party. So at the end of the 8 days and the funeral services, they all went back to their normal lives. And I couldn't. In the chapter 2 of the big book, it talks about the real alcoholic is often a moderate drinker, and if something happens, they cross the line and they can't go back. And it's kind of like my sponsor used to say, like, at some point the cucumber that soaks in the brine becomes a pickle, and once it's become a pickle, it never goes back to being a cucumber. And so I was the cucumber. I was no longer a cucumber. I was a pickle, and I was a daily drinker and daily user of cocaine for a while. I used the cocaine to get me up in the morning and to keep me drinking at night. The lies got more frequent, and the dishonesty and bad behavior got more frequent and a little more mean. I can remember stealing tip money from my friends so I could buy another, in the bathroom, take the $5 out of their stack of dollars they had for the for the bartender, and I'd buy myself something. And they started to catch on and stop inviting me out. I'd throw up in one of their cars, they'd stop inviting me out. I'd pee my pants in one of their cars and pass out, they'd stop inviting me. But so at one point, my brother Kevin lived a few miles from me, and he liked to throw darts at his house, and he used to like to throw darts in taverns. But everybody in my family had a pending addiction. They were all pushed into it with the news of Brian's death. And I was kind of head of the pack because I was I was a daily drunk and they weren't. But so I wanted to make Kevin a dartboard cabinet, and I would work on it in the evenings and hide booze in the basement. I'm not spending the weeknights now with my wife. I'm down in the basement working on this project, and I was trying to record this song onto a cassette player, and I somehow disconnected it and inadvertently recorded me sanding and hammering and using a drill. And I went to go listen to the song on the tape and realized this is me working, and then like a light bulb went off. Oh, I can go downstairs, turn on the tape really loud, and drink and do some lines of coke, and not actually have to work on this cabinet. And whenever I heard the door open up to the top of the basement, if my wife wanted to talk to me, I would just turn off the tape, dump sawdust on the floor, and grab a broom and said, "I'll be up in a couple minutes," and she could see me sweeping. And you consume like a liter of vodka, no matter how much you shower, brush your teeth, and you lay down next to somebody who didn't, they're going to know it. And I thought I was getting away with something I wasn't. And it wasn't long before my mother came out to visit me. I lived about an hour from where she lived. I lived in Flemington, New Jersey. She lived in Summit, New Jersey. And she told me she wanted me to get help with my drug and alcohol problem. I guess Barbara had been filling her in. And so I went to rehab on 8/8/88, and it would have been an easy date to remember as a sobriety date, but it's not mine. I do remember lying on the intake form, like cut everything down by more than 50% about usage. And they said, "Oh, based on this information, you are completely an alcoholic drug addict." And I'm like, really? So, for 30 days I was an inpatient. It was easy not to drink there because it wasn't around. I didn't know anybody there, and I, tried to follow the rules as best I could, and got out of there, felt better, started going to meetings right away, but really felt like I wasn't. At 25 years old, I had a business do I have being an alcoholic? I guess I was 28 at the time, but I didn't think I was alcoholic. I thought I was just having a run of bad luck, and the spotlight was on me, and if I could get my luck to change and the spotlight off of me, I could go back to what I was doing, and maybe less frequently. But so I was like a 90-day wonder. After 90 days of recovery, I wondered if I was really an alcoholic, and I tried some controlled drinking. My wife had to go out of town for the weekend, and I was thinking I'll drink Friday night, maybe Saturday, and clean up Sunday and Monday. Nobody will know. Who'll be hurt? Just hurting me if anybody gets hurt. And so that lasted 6 months of drinking. Everybody knew on Monday that I was back at it. And then after I hit a bottom there that was worse than the other bottom, I started going to meetings again. I met this guy, Jack, and he was willing to be my sponsor. He was really helpful. He talked the big book and the 24-hour day book and the step book, and it He was really good at calling me back. He was a very busy guy at work, so I often would leave a message and he'd call me back. And then at some point, like 2 months in, he stopped calling me back. And I started to resent him for not calling me. And I did the classic, I'll show you, I'll hurt me. And I started drinking, doing drugs again, and hit a bottom again very quickly in like 2 months. And so when I hit that bottom, I actually stole from my employer from like petty cash and got fired over it. And I was an up and comer at work when I first got out of college, and now I was like dead wood to everybody that would hire me. But so I go to my used to be regular meeting, and it's an anniversary night, and Jack's sponsor, Jack's wife, are up there receiving Jack's medallion because Jack was killed in a car accident right around the time he stopped calling me back, oddly enough. And I realized for the first time, like I know I can be an a-hole and a jerk sometimes, but I didn't realize what a self-centered a-hole and jerk I am most of the time. I didn't check with Jack's sponsor when Jack stopped calling me back. I didn't take any extra steps to find out what's going on. I just I'll show you, will hurt me. And so around this time, my wife said, listen, I can't live like this anymore. You need to get sober. You're not getting sober here. So go get help. And if you sober up, you can come back. So my best friend lived out in Upper Macungie, Pennsylvania, just west of Allentown. It was across the highway from the Stroh Brewery, which had been the Schaefer Brewery, and today it's the Sam Adams Brewery. But he and his roommate really tied one on all the time. Frank was into coke and alcohol, and Kelly was mostly a beer drinker, but drank like a case of beer a day. So I moved in with them, paid them rent money. And like after about a week and a half, Kelly, who has the leases in his name, calls a meeting in the kitchen. Look, the rent's paid, but we're low on the rest of the money for the household utilities. And it doesn't look like we have enough to get an oil delivery, except for maybe like a short run that can give us a little bit. But, I think we can be optimistic, maybe lower the house temperature and we can throw a big party this weekend and just, room at the house like in the low 60s and we'll be okay. So I got voted down. I said, no, let's get some oil delivered. It's January. And Frank and Kelly wanted a party. It was a heck of a party. There was a lot to drink, a lot of drugs to do. And we did them and had a good time. But like 4 days later, it's like 41 in the house. And then a few days after that, Kelly says to me, you're Frank's best friend in the world. And I'm having issues with him. And you seem to be like making this situation imbalanced for me. So I need you out of here right away. So he gave me back my rent money. And I went back to my parents' house, 29 years old, failure out of rehab, and asked if I could stay with them, and they said yes. And they charged me rent to stay in their house, and they gave me not the bedroom I had when I was in college, but the bedroom I had when I was 8, right at the top of the second floor landing. So that very first night, around 11 o'clock, 11:15, my father, all drunk, kind of wanders in, eyes glazed over, and looks at me and says, "You've been a burden to me and your mother since the day you were born. Pack a bag and get out of here. I don't care if I ever see you again." And he wobbles and turns around and walks out. So the next morning I come down with the bag of clothes, and my father's got a cigarette going. He's reading the Newark Star Ledger and drinking his coffee. Looks up and goes, "Hey, what's with the bag?" I'm like, "What, Dad? I thought you didn't want me here." He goes, "Of course I don't want you here. You're married. You're 29. What the hell are you doing living here? But where are you going to go?" And I said, "Dad, I have no idea." "Well, don't be ridiculous. Put the bag away." And it was the first time it dawned on me that he was a complete blackout drunk, and the stuff he did after he was drinking, he didn't remember. Because that night, second night, "You've been a burden to me and your mother since the day you were born. Pack a bag, get the hell out of here. I don't care if I ever see you again." Saunters back out. I come down with the bag. Like 3 days in a row, this goes on. "What's with the bag?" Like, he's not even remembering the conversation he had, like, when he wasn't drunk. And then I stopped bringing down the bag, but he didn't stop coming into my room between 11 and 11:15 every night. I was there for 30 days. And I ran into a guy I knew at an AA meeting that I went to high school and college with, and he said, "Hey, look, I just bought a house. I could use a roommate. If you need a place to stay, I'll only charge you this much rent if you help with some household chores." And I said, "Okay." I showed up with all my stuff the next day, and got out of my parents' house, which was like a win for me. But I started going to these meetings, and there was this old guy, Kelly, who talked a little bit like Grandpa Simpson. "Thank you for the flat tire, Lord. And I got to meet the nicest gentleman from the motor company." And he was a big believer in the 24-hour-a-day book. And he said, "Take that book and put it under your bed when you go to sleep. When you get up in the morning, you have to get on all fours to get it. You pull it out, and you read the thought for the day, the meditation for the day, and the prayer for the day. Even if you don't believe in God, stay down there and say that prayer every day. Don't miss. And it'll help get you sober." And so that coming weekend, I had this dream, because I was like suicidal ideations that, in these runs that I had that didn't seem to have an end, that, killing myself might be the best way to resolve this ongoing problem. And I had this dream that I walked into the condo I no longer lived in Flemington, and someone had hung themselves from the second floor landing, and the rope was tied to the banister. So in the dream, I untie the rope, and the body falls. I try to catch it. It knocks us both to the floor. So I'm pinned under this body. I sit up, roll it over, and it's me, dead, that I'm looking at. Wake up, I'm sweating, and I decided I'm definitely not missing the meeting tonight. And it was an open anniversary meeting, and my sister went, and her friend from ACOA went, and her friend's boyfriend, John, was there with them, and I met this guy Rich that night. There was like 120 people there, so they don't pass around like they don't. It's open. They don't ask who's new or anything. And so as people are celebrating between 90 days and 22 years, John's watching the look on my face change, because I don't think the years are describing between 4 or 5 and up are feasible for me. "Hey, what's the matter? What do you think all these people have in common?" And I'm like, "Oh, I think they're all liars. They're pathological liars." And he goes, No, that's not it. What's going on is they were just like you. They drank every day, or hit bottoms every week, and really needed the help, and something got them to ask for help. And they didn't drink 1 minute. They took a drink, and the next minute they didn't drink. And they maybe fought for that minute, but they did that the next minute, and the next minute kept doing the same thing. The next thing you know, they had an hour away from a drink. And so, they started going to meetings regularly. They got a sponsor. They worked the steps, and their lives changed. This is the inspiration story of hope, and you're looking at it with disdain. And like, well, I can see doing 90 days. I can maybe see doing a year, but like 22 years, you gotta be kidding me. I'm 29 years old. That's almost all my adult memories are don't encase 22 years at this point. Doesn't seem possible or feasible or likely. So he gives me his number, and this guy Rich, who was around my dad's age, overheard our conversation. He gave me his number too. And so later on that week, my youngest brother James, who was also in my parents' house, invited me up to his room after dinner to go play chess. And I knew he'd beat me because he was a good chess player. But he had lines of cocaine laid out in my favorite beer, chilled to the point that had condensation dripping down the sides. He goes, "Oh, help yourself." I'm like, "Man, you are just like the devil. Like, you know what's going on with me. My marriage is falling apart, and my life's falling apart. I can't get a good job anymore, and the drinking and drug is going to kill me before I'm 30 years old. I can't be around this shit." And I stormed out of his room and looked for John's number. I couldn't find it. I found Rich's number and called Rich. Told him what was going on. I said, "Listen, the part of me wants to go in there, dive in, do the coke, drink the beer. I've only got a handful of days. And if I didn't have that recent experience of failed controlled drinking, I'd probably be doing that. But at least 52% of me doesn't want to do that. But there's part of me thinking, I'm on the 3rd floor of my parents' house. I could open the window, just jump out and die on the driveway. What do you think?" And Rich just starts talking. And talking. And talking. And talking. About an hour and a half later, He stops talking. He takes a breath. But at some point, the thought in my head was, do I go back in there and do that? Or do I listen to this guy? Do I jump out the window? To like, oh my God, this guy hasn't shut up in over an hour. When will this guy shut the hell up? Is what my final thought was when we said goodnight. But I no longer had the urge to drink and drug when we got off the phone, and I went to bed. And the next day, I ran into Rich and asked him to be my sponsor because he saved my ass. And it turns out Rich wasn't a guy who like went to meetings regularly. He definitely didn't know the steps other than what hangs on the wall. He didn't do any step work with his sponsor. I actually don't think he had a sponsor. And I was hearing in meetings that like the key is to get with a sponsor and do everything they say. So a couple weeks later, I run into John, the guy from that first night. And so they had these rules in AA, like, you know, go to 90 meetings in 90 days. You can't lead a meeting until you've had 90 days. You can't give an AA lead until you have 90 days. You can't lead a meeting for your group until you've had a year. And they don't want you to be in a relationship in your first year, a new relationship in your first year. So my marriage was ending. My wife had filed for divorce, and I went up to John and said, John, did you get in any relationships in your first year? Oh, yeah, a couple actually. Did you drink over them? He goes, no, I didn't. I said, would you be my sponsor? So that's how this thing started with John. And John had a great sense of humor, and he wasn't like a stern authoritarian. He always made me think. And I'd rather be asked to think than told what to think. And so we got along famously, and he's still my sponsor today. And he lives in Utah now. We talk periodically, but he's in my thoughts all the time. And so John told me that he didn't think I could go 24 hours without a drink. Just it was too long of a time. So he pointed out that there's like 6 to 8 hours I'll be asleep. And he's heard of people talking in their sleep, walking in their sleep, but nobody drinks in their sleep. So he wanted me to break up the day after I got to work. I was to call one person before lunch and 2 people in the afternoon from AA. I knew people at the meetings, I had their numbers. I could call them or him. And even if I just left a message, I've touched base with a foundation of people in sobriety on a similar mission before I've gone to the meeting that night. And I did do like 110 meetings in 90 days. I did everything he suggested, and he was right that it made it easier to get through the day. I didn't have to go long stretches daydreaming about what I could be doing instead, because I used to think about that all the time. Like, it was always about, how do I get more coke, or how am I going to get the money to pay for the alcohol? And that's what my focus was. And so, you know, after about 90 days of going to meetings and not drinking and doing this practice of the 24-hour day book and calling 3 people a day, I had like a solid network of people to call and I felt comfortable with. And the obsession that would come upon me to drink and drug that I have to fight off stopped coming as frequently and eventually just dissipated shortly thereafter. And it's by the grace of God. Nothing I did really makes that happen. But if you do what I did, it might happen for you. Because it happened for me, it happened for John that way too, and his sponsor, and that's why it was taught to me that way. But so John got me into the steps, and when I struggled on step 2, we went back and did step 1 and then 2. And when I struggled on step 3, we went back and did 1, 2, and 3. And when I struggled on step 4, we just went back to 3 and 4. And when I struggled on 5, we went back to 3, 4, and 5. So it took a while to get through 4 and 5. But that's okay. There was stuff that I couldn't remember, like, you know, why was I having this crazy dream about being 8 in Ohio? So I still am not going to give you that now. I'll tell it to you later. So there was this woman at meetings that she was attractive. She was older than me. She always dressed really nice, drove a BMW, but she was a knitter. She'd sit there knitting during the meeting. And I first thought, God, she's never even paying attention. And then, like, if there'd be a dull point in the meeting, and we're talking about self-centered fear or something like that, she would just drop this pearl of wisdom, like jaw-dropping, like, wow, that really makes me think. And so she had one on relationships, on unanswered prayers, and all kinds of things. Just like, she was like a wealth of knowledge, and would give a short, concise share that was right to the point and just cut through the BS of personal drama. And she hung around with those people that had 22 years, you know. And so I had a lot of respect for her, and I thought I really had a sense of who she was. We started dating, and she was loving and supportive and kind and giving. And so instead of investing like multiple years getting to know her, I just asked her to marry me, and she said yes. And she told me she really wanted to have a kid, and she was older than me, so we started trying right before we got married, and then she got pregnant right before we got married. She didn't want to do a family wedding because she knew my family dynamics were a little dicey, and hers certainly were. So we drove to Maryland and got married by a justice of the peace, and she must have stopped taking her meds, which I didn't know about, right before we got married, because we drove away from the courthouse, and she turns to me 10 minutes later and says, "I think I made the single biggest mistake in my life just now." And then when our daughter Colleen was born, the doctor hands the baby to her, and then she hands the baby to me, and, you know, not, "Congratulations, Terry, you're a dad." If we ever split up, I get custody. And you could see the anesthesia, or the OBGYN with a mask on. His jaw drops so much that the mask on it like flips up to his nose, and he's just stunned. He's never heard such a thing in the delivery room. She wanted a honeymoon on Montauk, and Montauk is super expensive out of the eastern end of Long Island, but in October it's really cheap to get some places. So we went out for like the first week in October. We got married in July, and on the drive out to our honeymoon, she says, "Oh, could we make a stop on the way there?" I'm like, "Sure. Just let me know when to get off." And so we're on the LIE, and we get off at Holtzville. And the only thing I know about Holtzville is that's where I send the tax return every year. And sure enough, we go to the IRS building, and she gets out with a binder in a packet this thick. She goes, "Can you wait here?" I'm like, "Yeah." She goes in. She's in there about 40 minutes, comes out white as a ghost, and gets in the car. And I said, "What's going on?" She goes, "Well, I haven't paid my federal income taxes in 8 years, and we now owe $16,000. We now owe $16,000. So I said, "Well, do you have any money saved towards?" She's like, $1,200. I said, "Well, I can take money out of my 401k. There'll be penalties, but we can get it taken care of." "Oh, that's good. That's a relief." And so we go on this like honeymoon. We actually see Billy Joel and Paul Simon have a breakfast together at some cool diner in Montauk. And we drive home. And then, you know, the crazy things, it turns out she's got borderline personality disorder and bipolar. And I didn't know any of it when I met her. I didn't know she was on medication for it. And it manifests itself often with money. And big amounts, and just crazy. It was just unsettling, unnerving. And so I guess it was about 7 years sober. My mother passed away at 6 years sober. She was diagnosed with lung cancer. She had stopped smoking 15 years before, but she was diagnosed with lung cancer, given about a year and a half to live. And she went through all kinds of radiation treatments. I think she had some chemo, but she had about 6 or 7 good weeks in that time. And the rest of it was all kind of recovering from treatment, and she was taken from us, and she was like my anchor, because I couldn't go to my father for advice, because the worthless piece of crap conversation would start. And "Well, you're a numbnuts, you don't know anything anyway. Well, you're not going to listen to me now, I'm not going to tell you." You know, that would be my dad's response. And so my mother was wonderful and insightful at times. Like I was dating a girl in AA before I met my future ex-wife, and my dad really liked her. I kind of liked her, and I, introduced her to my mother, and I go, "What do you think?" After she leaves, she goes, "I think she'd be hard to get rid of. I'd move on." And she was so right. But so I at some point when my daughter Colleen's about 5 years old, we go to marriage counselors. We go to 3 different marriage counselors. She lies to all of them about what's going on in our house and with money. And I decide, like, if my daughter's going to have either going to have 2 crazy parents or 1 crazy parent. The only way she ends up with 1 crazy parent is if I divorce her mother. So I filed for divorce. I can't afford to move out. I'm there for 6 more months before I can save enough to get my own place. And once I get my own place, it gets really nasty every single day, getting phone calls and stuff. And John, my sponsor, was an Army reservist and was activated and had to go overseas. So listen, you're not going to be able to communicate with me for like 6 months. You'll send me a letter, I can read it. But when I send you back, you won't be able to read it. It'll be all redacted and crap. So ask somebody else to be your temporary sponsor. So there's this guy, Jamie. I loved his message. I asked him to be my sponsor until John got back. And he said, yeah, I can do that. And so after a week or two, I see him at a Friday night meeting. I said, can we talk after the meeting? We go to the far end of the parking lot. And he went through a difficult divorce. And so I asked him, how do you get through a single day? Because this is what's going on with me. And I'm telling him, he goes, well, so the beauty of cell phones is they have voicemail. So whenever it's my attorney, my ex, her attorney, it goes to voicemail. After I've been to a meeting, talked to my sponsor, I'm in a calm spiritual place, I'll listen to it. But I will not respond to it till I've been to another meeting and in a calm spiritual place and talk to my sponsor, because it's often a trap to get me to spend money or to say something that's going to hurt my chances to end up with custody. And then he had nuts and bolts, things like that, like how to get through, and just not, get pulled into the vortex of argument for about 45 minutes. And I thought it was really helpful. And I get home and there's I get a call from my attorney. It's 9:30 in the morning. She goes, I just received a 14-page fax. And based on our hourly rate that we've negotiated, if I read this and respond to it, it's going to set you back a couple $1,000s. And I said, well, can you send it to me first and I'll tell you if you have to respond? And she said yes, so she faxed it over. I read it and told her she needed to respond. It was our exact conversation. Somebody from the group, because we were both in the same home group, and there were people that liked her better than me, and maybe they thought they were being helpful, but they gave her a recording of our conversation, and she basically typed it up verbatim. And my ex must have stayed up like 3 o'clock in the morning to type this up and get it to her attorney. So that meeting that used to cost me $2, I put in one for me and one for the guy that really needs AA but hasn't found it yet. Instead of costing me $2, it cost me $2,202. And I was paying half the mortgage, child support, and alimony, and living in a dump that I could barely afford, and going through the divorce. And so it wiped me out, the $2,000 extra. And all of a sudden, AA didn't feel safe, and I was betrayed by my home group, and I stopped going there. And I became an AA vagabond and would go to meetings on the road after sales calls. Instead of going to lunch in the city or Long Island, I'd go to meetings. And then I'd come home and not go to meetings on the weekend in my hometown with my friends and network. But my innermost circle I talked to, but I wouldn't go to meetings with them where I lived. And work started offering multi-state territories to be specific leader on a particular product. My hand always went up. They gave me these jobs that went from 6 states to 15 states to 10 states. So I would go to meetings in all these different states and never in my hometown. And so I stopped sponsoring, I stopped doing service work, and I paid a price for it. And AA has to feel safe, and it didn't for me where I lived. And I really paid a high price for it. It's so nice to be here and today have I'm members of a couple different groups, the men's meeting on Monday night, speaker meeting Thursday night, and Saturday morning, 9 a.m. meeting, great meeting. And but so, 7 years after my divorce from my second wife, I got remarried, and met this woman. After I said a prayer in the daytime, because I had a daytime date that got messed up, and the girl left early. We didn't even have lunch to do the date. She had something going on, and she said, I'm just going to go. So I sat in my car with like a tear in my eye and said a prayer out loud. God, I'm so done looking. If you want me to be with somebody, and you may not, but if you want me to be with somebody, you're going to have to deliver, because I'm done looking. Amen. And so that night, I got invited to go to this ministry dance for 20s and 30s at my church, and actually it was a multi-parish dance at St. Joseph's Shrine, Sterling, New Jersey. And I go there, and I sang in the contemporary choir at church. and we sang in the front, but way off to the side. And this woman recognized me as one of those people, and she wanted to introduce herself. And she came up and introduced that her name was Carmen, and my favorite customer's name was Carmen. And I said, "Oh, cool." And they were going to teach a country line dance. She goes, "You know how to country line dance?" I said, "I have no idea how to country line dance." She goes, "I'm good at it, so watch me." And so I kind of watched her and learned this country line dance. And after that, they played a swing. I said, "Well, do you know how to swing?" And she said, "Yes." And so we swing danced together. And then they played like a rumba. We did rumba together. We danced a bunch of songs together. So after my parents were both gone, my father died 2 years after my mother. I wasn't so sad when he passed, because nobody's going to tell me I was a worthless piece of shit again for the rest of my life. So that was like pretty good news. But so my family asked me to interface with the nursing home, and so I go over there, and they got a big book of Jesus cards for mass cards. So they got a big book of Mary mass cards and 2 big binders of saints. I said, "Would you happen to have like the Holy Family on a card?" She goes, "No, we really don't, because that would be like if the whole family died, you'd want to have that card." And she goes, "Why would you want that card?" I said, "Because, when I was a kid, he often addressed us, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. But take that outside. You're so noisy." But I just thought it was funny. The funeral director did not find it funny. Some of my family found it funny. But so I was, like kind of rudderless as a person, without my mom to guide me, and I, counted on a therapist, and she asked me what was my relationship with God, and I said, "Well, frankly, I feel like I can't forgive my father completely, and so I don't feel I'm forgiven by God, and I made thousands of foxhole prayers get me out of this, so I use the group of drunks as my higher power, as per my sponsor's instructions." And she goes, "Well, what about miracles? Do you believe in miracles?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I believe in miracles, but I've never seen one. If I see one, I'll believe more." And she goes, "You've never seen a miracle? Really?" And I said, she goes, "You used to be a daily drunk, a daily coke user, risk going to jail every single day, and you don't do that anymore. You don't see that as a miracle." I could understand that, but how many meetings you go into a week? I said, "About 7. She goes, "What's the average number of people at the meeting?" I said, "It's about 20. Sometimes it's like 6 or 7, sometimes it's 50, and that's kind of a good average." She goes, "So God presents you with 140 miracles every single week, and you see none of them? Really?" And it really sent me back, and it started me on a spiritual journey that's just been fabulous, but that I didn't expect. But so I had created this bucket list after my parents were gone. I always admired at a Polish or Italian wedding how the couple that needed help to get out of the car in the parking lot, to get seated at their table, to get up from the table, when their song came on, they used their body weight to hold each other up, and they float around the dance floor. And I said, "That's the guy I want to be when I'm old." So I took dance lessons at Arthur Murray, and Carmen, who's my current wife, took dance lessons at another studio in Passaic, New Jersey. And we hit it off, and I had her attend my standing dance lesson at Arthur Murray when she could fit it into her schedule. And I knew in a couple of months that this is the one for me. She was a non-drinker, did need 12 steps. She wasn't a project like I was, and the girls I was meeting in AA. And I asked her to marry me, but I wanted a lengthy engagement, but I wanted to be tied up in a commitment so my ex couldn't interfere with the relationship like she had with some others. And so her residency transferred from UMD&J in Newark to LSU in New Orleans. So she was away for like 2.5 years, and she wanted to get married before she left. And I said, "You know what? I just spent 5 years married to somebody who wouldn't sleep in the same bedroom with me. She slept with our daughter every night. I just can't imagine being married to somebody who sleeps in Louisiana, and I sleep in New Jersey alone every night. So no, I will not marry you until you're back. But if we stay together, God will really bless us. I'm confident of that." And sure enough, He has. And she really wanted to have a kid. She was 5 years younger than me, and I was okay not having another kid, but always wanted more than one. And we tried like heck for 5 years and kind of gave up based on her age and my age. And then when I was 51, she turns up pregnant. John was retiring from Army. He was at Fort Jackson in Columbia, South Carolina, where my older daughter, Colleen, was in college. And Carmen was car sick the whole way there, the whole way back. And she's never car sick. She likes long drives, especially scenic ones, and that's a scenic drive. I asked her if we wanted to stop at Hershey, Pennsylvania, and get some fresh chocolate. And she's like, no, I'd throw up. And this is a woman that loves chocolate. So we get home, and I said, why don't you get a pregnancy test just to rule it out before you make a doctor's appointment and find out why you're nauseous all the time. She goes, don't be a jerk. And then she brings up the story at work, and they tell her, yeah, he might be a jerk, but he might be right. So she buys a pregnancy test, comes up positive, buys another one, and another one, buys like 10 of them, and she's pregnant on all of them. And so she's kind of ruled out the idea of false positive, and now we got a baby on the way. And so at 52, I became a new dad. And I'm blessed to say that neither of my daughters ever saw me drunk, because one daughter's 31 and the other one's 11. There's 19 and a half years between them, and they're both really incredible people. Emily, my little one, is a lot like me, goofy, and at that age, goofy and a bit of a daydreamer, doesn't always pay attention, but very creative and funny. And so I'm a little worried about her, but she has two parents to guide her, and Carmen's a wonderful mother and a wonderful partner. And about a year ago, actually it was just over a year ago, the 19th of May, I came home from a cantor rehearsal at my church, reviewing the songs we were doing this weekend, and I'd sit down at dinner, and my wife goes, you look peculiar. And my little one, Emily, goes, Dad, you look like a Simpson. And my wife goes, yeah, that's it, you look yellow. We're taking you to the hospital. So I opened my shirt in the bathroom, I'm yellow, mid-chest up, and through my face. And I'm hoping it's hepatitis, because I've eaten some takeout food I wouldn't normally eat. And it wasn't hepatitis, it was pancreatic cancer stage 4 with metastases to the liver. And so this was all, like, I didn't feel that sick at all. And so the next day the chaplain comes to visit me and talks to me about, this, he said, this takes people quickly, it has a high mortality rate above 90%, like 91 or 90 point something. And so how do I feel about my prospects? And I said, well, yeah, I can tell you honestly, I have a good relationship with God today. And I've been sober 33 years, just a year ago. And so my liver's been on vacation for 33 years, and it's ready for a fight if it needs to be in one. And folks in AA taught me how to live one day at a time, so I'm not going to give in to worry. I'm just going to take it a day at a time. And he just looks at me and goes, I've never had a conversation like this with this kind of news. And that attitude's going to serve you well. And so it actually has. But I want to go back and revisit 18 years of recovery. My oldest brother's oldest son has graduated college, and there's a big party from up in Massachusetts, so I drive up with my wife, Carmen, and we get seated with my brother Kevin and his future wife, and my brother James and his wife and their daughter. And Kevin starts telling the story about me being 8 years old and being out of the car on a trip to Michigan. So we'd gone all through Pennsylvania without stopping to pee, and because my father was drinking beer for the 8 hours. And so first rest stop we get to in Ohio, we all get out and scatter to the bathrooms and empty our bladders. And then he buys us McDonald's meals, and they didn't have Happy Meals back then, they had meals. So I got the hamburger meal, which is a 20-ounce soda, a hamburger, and a small fry. And as an 8-year-old who just emptied his bladder, I guzzled that 20 ounces of soda. It was ice cold. Ate the burger, it was delicious, the fries were delicious, I was satisfied. And a few minutes later, my parents are done shopping for a gift in the gift shop, and they go, okay, anybody need to go to the bathroom? I said, no, we just went. So we get in the car, and we're about 20 minutes out, and I have to pee again. And we got 10 people in this station wagon. And so my father pulls over on Route 80 in Ohio and says, run down to the tree line and relieve yourself. So I go down this little slope and find a tree, and so nobody can see me. I get positioned so I can't see the road, and I'm peeing. And then I get back up to the road, and the car's gone. They've driven away. And they don't come back. And it's an hour and a half before they turn up. And so I find myself wandering along the side of a cornfield. I don't see anybody even ask, where am I? I had like 35 cents on me. And Kevin tells the story like it's funny. And there he was, sitting on the side of the road crying his eyes like a big pussy. And it gets in the car and nobody says a word, right? That's why Kevin tells the story. And I talked to my sister Kathleen, and she goes, well, there's more to the story. You were always singled out and treated worse than everybody else by Dad. But for 45 minutes, Mom was like, Jack, you cannot show up at your cousin's house with 7 of your 8 children. Jack, you cannot show up at your cousin's house with 7 of your 8 children. Jack, you cannot. And she had to do that for 45 minutes before he decided to turn around. And some of that might have been the distance between exits, but a lot of it's just my dad hating my guts. And so, luckily nothing happened to me, but I got in the car, there was no apology. There was no explanation why I was out there all that time. I didn't need an hour and a half to take a leak, But so that revealed to me like this, why I had this incredible sense of abandonment. Like if I was in a relationship and one thing happened that made me not trust the other person, I ended it. If I had a job where the boss was beginning to ride me like a jockey, I just immediately looked for another job. And I'd get into a relationship and I always kind of on eggshells, pins and needles, afraid that something's going to happen that's going to make this all go away very quickly and by surprise. And I never knew where that came from until this was revealed to me because I was ready for it. So I had to go back and do like a 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th on this event. Because, I can't really be mad at Kevin for telling the story like it's funny. He was a kid. So if you're in your family of kids and one of these family members, all he had to do was go to the bathroom and he didn't break anything. And he's now out of the family and possibly never seen it again. Like, how do you process that? He processed it as funny. But because I think about my younger brothers and sisters, how would they process it, And it was so hard for me to process, I blocked it for all those years. So I owe my brother an amends for resenting him for telling that story, but he really opened the door for my serenity. So if you're new or coming back, I would highly recommend you do what I did in the beginning. Put that 24-hour day book under your bed. Fish it out in the morning while you're on your knees. Read the thought for the day, the meditation for the day, and the prayer for the day, even if you don't believe in God or you feel disconnected from God, or even if a group of drunks is your God. Do those things. And do what John suggested. Call somebody in the morning before lunch. Call 2 people in the afternoon and attend a meeting that night. And before you know it, you'll have built a network that's going to make your sobriety so much easier on you. It worked for me, it worked for him, and I highly recommend it. I just celebrated a year for my cancer diagnosis. And I was told I had 4 months to live. And I have an AA network that gets me through things. I have a family network. I've got people praying for me all over the world. And I feel like a miracle today. And I felt like a miracle other times when God intervened. And so I'm confident there is a God that's going to help you if you seek him out. So, miraculous things will come to pass if you don't drink and go to meetings. Get with a sponsor who knows the book and can take you through the steps. I wish you the very best of luck. That's my story.